Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I am Paul John Dykes, as you know, and I'm joined by John Paul Mason. It's a Thursday afternoon. We're here for 1 hour to talk all things Celtic and other subjects that might take our fancy, JP. We have been known to digress from time to time, but there is certainly a lot to talk about. Man City game gave us a lot to think about, JP. What was your overall thoughts about it?
I enjoyed it. I stayed up late into the small hours to watch it. Definitely a bit of needle for me that we were playing Man City and we remain undefeated against them, which is pretty cool. I think it's us and Wigan, the only teams that have not been beaten by Man City. So that was there was that as well. Obviously, when you see the sides, Man City are way off full strength, so it's not. We shouldn't be lifting the pre-season cup too hastily after beating them. But I think if you just think about Celtic and focusing on Celtic and how they played, I thought it was really good. I thought we exploited weaknesses in their side. It's still a Pep Guardiola team. It's still a Manchester City team of Manchester City players and people that they're hanging their hat on. Some of them for the future. They do bang the drum about the fact that they've brought youngsters through now, like Phil Foden and whatnot. So these guys that were playing the other night, some of them are potential Phil Fodens of the future. So
yeah,
I was just happy that we played well, and you saw the best of Kyogo and the best of Kuhn. Matt O'Reilly also really good. Maeda terrorised the boy at right back. He wasn't having a good time at all, and a bit more of a switched on Maeda maybe could have got himself a couple of goals. So I just think it was a good look overall that we were out there playing a game in front of a support that don't get to see Celtic that often. And obviously, yeah, you could point to the fact that the stadium wasn't full, but I think even to get a crowd of that level in North Carolina kind of speaks volumes about the size of Celtic. I don't know what the ratio was to Manchester City fans, but certainly seemed to be a decent amount of both. So yeah, it was an enjoyable game to watch. I pondered switching it off at half time, but I had a feeling there was more goals in the game, so I just stuck with it, and I'm glad I did, because it was as pre-season friendlies go, it was pretty good. I'm sure Manchester City were not happy about getting beat. I'm not saying they were going to be crying into their cornflakes, but you know they're built on winning. They just win everything, don't they? They won 4 league titles in a row in England, unprecedented. So losing any game of any sort will not have pleased them, I'm sure, and that pleases me.
No, absolutely. By the way, and you're right when you're talking about the quality that Man City had on display, because they did have obviously some big top players, but the guys that we have managed to acquire from Manchester City over the years have been top quality. I'm thinking about one who wore that jersey over your shoulder, as well as the likes of Dedrick Boyata and Jeremy Frimpong. These guys came in and showed you that kind of second tier in Man City is still top quality, you know. So we are up against guys, GP, that we might look back on in 3 or 4 years and go, oh, they played in that friendly against us. But I thought it was excellent, particularly the first half. I think when you look at the second half, there's a wee bit of a test of character there, because Man City come back and you think, all right, they're just going to turn the screw now. We've taken off our top performers. They're going to win this game, maybe at a canter. But it didn't happen. There was a bit of character shown. And I loved after the game, the man who scores the winning goal, right? The Belgian, who I think I want to have a wee chat about Palmer, because I've been bigging up Kuhn, to be fair, right? And as luck would have it, he has a brilliant game. I want to talk about Palmer at some point today as well. But as he was getting interviewed after the game, right? The bold Brendan walks past him and just reminds everybody that he can speak Spanish. You've not seen the clip yet, have you?
No, I've not seen it. No.
It goes Starman, obviously. My Spanish isn't great. And he shared that wee bit of a bond for that moment, put his arm around Palmer, and probably gave him a bit of confidence, because he is a man manager. I mean, I've seen a lot of these Liverpool clips popping up. You know that series that they did, the kind of fly on the wall series. I've seen a lot of the clips popping up, and people have gone, you know, this is top tier David Brent style, Brendan Rodgers stuff. But what I took from looking at the Eclipse again is that he is tough. He's ruthless. He really is ruthless with players. And I think that he can do that. Bit of tough love, JP, on the likes of Palma, who last season kind of disappeared from view for several months. When it got to the nitty-gritty, we had to rely on guys like Maida and Forrest on the wings, Palma on the bench coming in for wee cameos. But I don't think Rodgers has written him off. I mean, if you look at his figures last season, and you look at his goals and assists, he would actually be a very difficult player to replace, wouldn't he?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I think what transpired in the tail end of last season or the last 2 or 3 months was that he didn't trust him in the heat of the battle when you really needed somebody to roll their sleeves up and just dig people out, dig us out of holes and stuff like that. I don't really know if Luis Palma is that type of player. I mean, maybe he thinks he is, but I've not seen that. I haven't seen that. However, it was his first season. That's right. It was his first season, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was his first season. So you always do kind of allow players to sort of feel their way into a city or a club or whatever. Henrik Larsson. I mean, today's the day. It's not the anniversary when we signed Larsson. Larsson wasn't the guy that we became to know and love by the end of his 7 years after his first season. I mean, he contributed, no question, but he wasn't the swashbuckling, deadly predator that he became. So I'm not saying Luis Palma is going to become Henrik Larsson, far from it, but maybe there's things that have been happening with Palma that's changed Brendan Rodgers' mind on him a little bit. Who knows? I mean, there's not been any chat of him going anywhere, so he clearly seems to be that he's going to be a part of this squad going into this new season. So he has shown that he can do it at a high level in terms of the Champions League as well. So there's no, I don't think there's any real question marks over his talent. It's just probably his application, and Brendan Rodgers likes both of that. So if you've not got both boxes ticked, then you're probably going to be 1 foot out the door. But I don't know. I'm interested. I'm kind of intrigued to see how he does. I saw he walked by me and just near Central Station. I think it was like 2 weeks ago or something, and I didn't find myself wanting to go over and do a Paul the Tim or a Declan or whatever, and even just to speak to him, because I was like, I've bashed this guy. I've not got like a kind of like, oh man, that goal you scored at blah 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 or anything like that. Just I didn't have that kind of impetus to go over and say all right. But he's got a chance to prove people like me who doubt him and doubt his mettle. We've got a chance to prove us wrong. He's got a pathway into that first team that not many other people have at this moment in time in terms of his position. So, but he's got to dislodge Dyson Maeda, who I thought the other night was really good.
He was. And see, the thing with Maeda, right? I said this yesterday, JP. There was certain parts of last season that if we were to look back on the bulletins, the frustration that we felt as Celtic supporters around the team and the performances that we were churning out. And I remember Maeda getting dogs abuse. Not by you or me, but he was getting dogs abuse at certain points last season. But if you fast forward to that bit where you said we had to, make sure we were playing guys we could trust, it was the nitty-gritty, the going for the double at the end of the campaign, Maeda was outstanding. Maeda finished the season brilliantly. And then you look at that performance against Man City in particular, and he was excellent. He's one of the guys, he plays on instinct. The minute you give him a second to think about it, I think that's where it goes a wee bit awry. He hits the post, could have scored a goal. I thought he did terrorise him down that left-hand side. Palma's got to work hard to dislodge Maeda. But if, like you say, Rodgers can tap into that mentality, that state of mind, because, I look at a guy like Palma, I think he's got everything in terms of the ability and the technical aspect of it. I mean, the ball that he played to Mikey Johnston with the outside of the boot, reminiscent of the goal he set up against Aberdeen for O, when O puts the head on it. He's brilliant. He is. He's good with the distribution. He's got a bit of flair. He scores a goal as well. But imagine being that player, right? And being a player who, in terms of the team that you're at, Schmeichel mentioned this, Celtic's a different breed. You know, you're not a team where you're expected to win everything every single season and every single week domestically. And even Schmeichel mentioned that. I know that he went on to win the Premier League with Leicester and the FA Cup, but it wasn't with a team that was expected to win it, right? And when he was getting interviewed, Schmeichel, and I want to talk about him as well, because I thought, what a 45-minute performance that was. He was talking about that. And, you know, you've got these high-profile players who have played their football down south, who have been on the international stage for years, but not necessarily with a team like Celtic, whereby, you know, the expectations and the standards are so high that every single week you must win, you know. And even I've even seen us losing the plot when we've not played well in friendly games. It mean absolutely nothing, you know. And we've done the post-match and we're not happy with this aspect of the game and that, whereby he's played and had a very successful career and is a very wealthy man, I'm pretty sure, but never played with a team like Celtic, and he pointed that out. So if you're a player like Palmer and you're quite a fancy flair player and you're getting all the plaudits for that, you probably think that's enough. You know, you get by, you score a worldly, you've maybe not worked very hard that day, but you can go and enjoy your Saturday night, make a wee TikTok video and everybody's happy.
Instagram and you're wearing like £1,000 pair of trainers and, you know,
hey, yeah.
Everything's good. Everything's good and rosy in the garden. But
absolutely, yeah. Or the drip. Is that what the kids call it?
You probably a good few thousand folk just like, that Palmer was rotten the day. You know, like, I mean, he scored a good goal, but apart from that,
yeah, I know. And I think what Brendan's doing, because I'll tell you something, and I'm not saying they're at the same level. I don't know, because there's something within the makeup of Haksabanovic that means he will never reach the top level in football, and it's not ability. It's not ability, you know. And this is the thing. When I speak to ex-players, we're going to be with Joe Ledley tomorrow night, and I always try and tap into that. There's always somebody at training who looks like the best player in the team, and they can't translate it to the actual competitive action. They can't translate it to you know, a situation where the chips are down, JP, and you need them to pull something out the bag or dig in. And I even seen Palmer doing a bit of defensive work, which is so important for the wingers, especially when you've got the two young guys at fullback, you know, as we have had during this pre-season. So I still hold a bit of hope for Palmer. I don't know for sure, because bad habits.
He needs to get rid of that suitcase with his picture in it, though. Have you seen that?
I've not seen that yet. Tell me, what he's got a suitcase with his own face on it.
Aye. Well, I mean, it's not like a full-size picture of his face, but I'm pretty sure it's like the back of his shirt and he's pointing up. And it's, I don't know if it's I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Honduras might have made it for every player as like their
true
their international team case. And if that's the case, my apologies, Lewis. But like, geez, like that's a bit mental.
Surely some kind of sponsorship thing, some promo.
Surely he got ribbed for that going on that flight to America. I mean,
is he wearing the Honduras top?
I think so. Yeah.
Is he? I mean, you're giving me an idea the next time I go on holiday, so you can spot your nondescript suitcase going round that belt 25 times. Maybe do something.
He's not getting leeway for that. There's no way that's the reason why.
Oh, he doesn't stand in economy waiting for his suitcase, does he? No, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. No, so a wee bit of hope still there for Lewis Palmer. Let us know in the comment section if you agree with that. I'm not ready to write him off yet. I think that there were signs last season that he could do something. He could pull something out the bag. He scored the last goal of last season, didn't he? You know, in the league anyway, against St Mirren, and he's done okay during the pre-season. And, you know, I hope that it's about salvaging something from the transfers last season, JP, isn't it? We've spoken about that summer transfer window being really disappointing. And from the permanent signings that we made, who can we salvage? And when I'm looking through it, I'm looking at Palmer. I think there might be a chance we could salvage a player there. I'm looking at home. I've been pretty impressed with his performances in the pre-season. I thought he'd done pretty well against Man City. I'm not sure where he fits in the team, because some of the most impressive parts of play that I've seen from him have been offensive, you know, defence splitting passes and things like that. Whereas I was of the view that he was probably more of a Callum McGregor replacement in the long term. So I've been pretty impressed with him. Defender-wise, I've not seen anything from any of the guys that we signed for centre-half yet. I know that injury has played its part with Nawrocki. Lagerbielke's over there. He's on the trip, but I've not seen anything that would suggest that they're going to do anything. And of course, Yang and Kwon, Kwon played okay against Man City. I've got to give him credit because he's not a guy that I think should be at Celtic. I think we should move him on, but he played okay. Yang, I've not seen enough for Yang to suggest that he's going to have a Palmer-like contribution to the team. What's your take on salvaging something from that summer transfer window?
Well, at least home can actually pull off a back heel effectively. I saw the clip of Brendan Rodgers going absolutely tonto at Mikey Johnston because it was right after we conceded the goal. So
I know it was lazy.
Yeah, but I mean, home. I think was it recently that he made the comments about home saying, "I need to see more, but I know that there's something there." So it's kind of like he's obviously seen enough that there's something there that he wants to work with, which is classic Brendan Rodgers wanting to get the best out of a young player and develop him and all the rest of it, because he bangs the drum about that quite a lot, doesn't he? About how he's developed players in my time as a coach and all that. He gives a lot of that out there. So I mean, like the home signing, I thought his discipline obviously could be called into question after last season. The whole Instagram picture thing as well, which is a tiny thing to be picking up about on a young player, and you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt. He is a young player. You know, he's probably known Instagram his entire life. That's been his outlet, and probably been doing stuff like that since he was a wee guy. So there is that. But I mean, if Brendan Rodgers wants to keep a hold of home and thinks he can get some sort of sustained tune out of him, then I'd be happy to see what he can do with him. The other players, Lagerbielke's an interesting one. He's been front and centre in a lot of the I mean, if that is a guy that you've got no doubt that you don't see him as part of the squad going forward, like it's quite strange that he's out. I mean, I was critical of a friend last year who criticised the fact that Liam Scales was on the tour of Japan, basically saying, why is he there? What's the point? He's going to be gone. And then he goes on to play almost every single game and deservedly holds aloft the league trophy and has a league winners medal. So it'd be interesting to know conversations that have been had with Lagerbielke over like what is his role. I mean, he playing basketball in a basketball arena, getting pictured in the cut-off top and everything, and you're like, right, okay, that's fine, but I mean, he barely kicked the ball for us last season. He's out there, he's in all the shots that are getting put up on the socials and stuff, and you're just like, this is weird. Guy was nearly out the door in January, but for injuries and concerns over centre backs, he would have been gone, and probably would have been gone with a view to. So has Lagerbielke somehow like found a way back in? I mean, it certainly seems that way from the fact that he's there. I mean, you don't get taken on these things unless there's some sort of scope for the future. So I'd be interested to know if Lagerbielke is still here come the end of the transfer window, because that then answers that question. It would suggest, I mean, if there was interest in him in January, there's surely interest in him now. Why would that go away? So is he going to be part of it? Nawrocki, also a very interesting one. Is he the centre half that we will rely upon next season? And does that stop us from going and signing a centre half? Does Rodgers like him? Because if the answer to that is no on both counts with Lagerbielke and Nawrocki, then we need a centre half of quality. 100%. So all these question marks, and does he see Greg Taylor as his number one left back going into this campaign? If he does, then what are we looking to sign in that position?
What did you make of Taylor's comments? I don't know if you've seen them. He was asked about the fact he's going into the last 12 months of his deal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with a lot of these things, and we'll get to Brendan Rodgers' comments about transfers as well, sometimes there's two trains of thought. Sometimes you can read too much into these things, JP. It's a pre-season, and we pour over everything that the gaffer says and the player says. We're trying to figure out where we are with him. And he was asked about his contract, and he was pretty non-committal, Greg Taylor. And you don't know what the conversation's been behind the scenes about his future at the football club. I mean, at this moment in time, I think we've got one left back. Brendan Rodgers will tell you that Liam Scales is your backup. Kobayashi's been playing left back during the pre-season. And we simply don't have the quality there. for me to move into a Champions League group stage campaign. And I keep saying it, guys, that I am confident going into the group stage of the Champions League, probably half the team. And I would like to be able to sit here and say, we've got 9 or 10. There's maybe 1 or 2 doubts about some of the guys. And by the way, these are players like Rio Otata, who we bought for $1.5 million, Matt O'Reilly, who we bought for $1.5 million, but also guys like Alistair Johnson, who was a fairly inexpensive signing. Cameron Carter-Vickers, albeit he was signed for about £6 million. McGregor came through the ranks. Kyogo was 4.3. So these are guys, and Schmeichel was a free transfer. These are guys that I'm confident going into the Champions League with that have not cost the earth, right? And then you've got players like Nawrocki, who 4.3 is a transfer fee plus the wages and all that kind of stuff, and a very expensive acquisition. And the way I see the tiered system at the centre half position at the moment, JP, tell me if you agree. You've got Carter Vickers, who is the shining light. He is above anybody else in terms of his quality. Below him, I think Welsh and Scales are a bit kind of samey. I think in terms of quality, I know Scales has played more games, but I think they're the same kind of calibre of player. And then underneath them, massive question mark about Lagerbielke and Nawrocki for the reasons that you've suggested. But I see them as almost the third picks, in the centre-half positions. So for me, there's a gaping hole to be filled alongside Carter Vickers. I don't think we have that second centre-half at the same standard as CCV.
Well, and if that's the case, then we need to move Nawrocki on and move Lagerbielke on to clear the path for someone to come in. And then you've got Welsh and Scales as backup to those two, to complement them. But the Greg Taylor thing, when we in that last game of the season against St Mirren, when we got the pleasure of standing trackside and speaking to
Rodgers came to you. Right, Rodgers came. It's okay. I know these guys. I think that's what the direct quote was. Right?
There's no way he knows who I am, or that he came over. I think he just saw the group of everyone and maybe recognised 1 or 2 and went, "Oh."
You see how I've embellished that within about 2 months? I've totally embellished that, JP. That's how it goes, right?
But we also got to speak to Greg Taylor, and Jamie Flynn from 20 Minute Tim's asked him straight out, no qualms at all. We just went, Greg, is there any talk of a new contract? We know he's only got a year left, and Greg Taylor just said flat out, no, there's genuinely been nothing. And like to hear it actually from the player, you were like, yeah, that's a bit weird, especially when Celtic do like to hand out contracts like sweeties sometimes in terms of 5-year deals here and there and everywhere. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Greg Taylor going forward, because I like Greg Taylor. I just think that we could definitely improve upon him for an assault on Europe. I mean, that's no disrespect to the guy. It's just like you have to upgrade at some point. And if the chat is that we're looking to bring in a £5-6 million left back who will become the number one, Greg Taylor's maybe looking at that and going, well, why am I going to sign a deal to then be a number 2 when I've been used to being a number 1? Maybe wants to try another league somewhere. Celtic's not the be all and end all. He's just got married. He might be looking to start somewhere, America or something. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But
Italy, there's been a lot of good exports at the Scottish game going to Italy. And we know that Stephen Welsh was pinging on quite a few Italian clubs' radars, JP. And these guys, once they've got an agency or an agent involved, the thing with that is the agent has absolutely no loyalty whatsoever to anybody except for the Benjamins. That's it. It's like if he can do a deal for Greg Taylor to take him to Italy and make a few quid, then the agent will do it. So there's no real, for me, loyalty to Celtic in that respect, which frustrates the life out of me, because you've got good players in the past whose heads have been turned. Just while it's in my mind as well, you mentioned about taking players on the trip because there must be some kind of plan for them. It's interesting that Daniel Kelly's not on the trip, isn't it? He's been left at home.
Yeah, and just going back to that as well, I think Brendan Rodgers talks a lot about personality, and a great time to assess players' personality would be on a trip like this. And if you think about it, he's had a season to be in the trenches with them in terms of actual games, cold away days in the winter and all the rest of it. But he's not had that. I mean, what have they been away for? A week already in the States or so? So I think that environment where he'll be watching how players interact and things like. Just when you mentioned Kobayashi, I was like, Kobayashi's there. I mean, the guy was nowhere to be seen last season, pretty much, and yet he's out there and you're maybe looking at him and going, is there something I've missed about this guy, or is there something I've missed about this guy? You know, and that those things are more evident when you're in an environment like that. I think where you've not got the pressures of the games. You want to see how people, interact with each other, things like that. I think that's a big thing for him as well, because did he not talk about that with regards to Nawrocki and his personality at one point? He said he wasn't really seeing a big bit of personality from him. So I don't know. It does seem like it's a testing ground for folk to prove that they're, I guess, away from the football, that they are actually the right type of people to be at Celtic, because that's when you will discover. I mean, you're in close quarters with people and people are rooming together and you're all going for meals and all that. You'll soon find out the people who are maybe potentially bad eggs, or maybe not bad eggs, but just that they don't fit in the fabric of Celtic.
It takes a good mix, a different mix. Not everybody can be the rambunctious kind of type, JP. Some might be more quiet than others, but I think you're right about the testing ground, because as always, whenever I have the absolute privilege to be in the presence of someone who pulled on the hoops for real, I'm like a sponge. I like to find out these things, and from what I've learned speaking to, here we go, here's a name for you, better known for playing for Aberdeen, but Willie Garner signed for Celtic in the 1980s, and he's famous or infamous for scoring 2 own goals in his debut against St Mirren, believe it or not. And he still blames Pat Bonner for it. But anyway, 2 own goals. 2 own goals in your debut. Brilliant. I didn't think it quite reached the heights that he wanted it to after that. But he spoke about being on the Celtic bus. By the way, growing up a Celtic fan, and being in the Celtic bus, JP, and observing the type of player who would actually go and sit with the new start, the new arrival, right? And the new arrival could be someone like him who's been bought from another Scottish club, or it could be somebody who's been drafted in from the reserves or the kind of youth players. And he said that Danny McGrain was brilliant at it. And in actual fact, Danny McGrain almost mentored Charlie Nicholas when Charlie came. Can you imagine the two different sides of the scale when it comes to personality? You've got Charlie, who was a kind of flash kid coming along with the no socks, the suit jackets rolled up to the elbows. Apparently, he always walked about with a Walkman on, right? And he was listening to Spandau Ballet. Spandau Ballet. And then you've got Danny McGrain, who is Danny McGrain, a completely different character. So he was someone who would take young guys under his wing. And Tommy Burns, probably no surprise to anybody tuning in, Tommy Burns was the guy who sat with Willie Garner on the bus and talked to him about Celtic and what it means to play for the football club and the standards that you need to set for the fans that pay the hard-earned cash to come and watch. I still think we've got that. I still think that guys like Callum McGregor, James A. Forrest, Tony Ralston are there. And actually, guys that came in and became that type of player as well last season, I think Joe Hart was that type of player. Listen, I'm speculating. I've never been on a Celtic bus, right? But I'm thinking that's the type of player, JP, that does that. And if you've got someone who's a bit on the fringes of the group, if you like, then it sometimes takes someone else to bring them into the group. So I do think it's a testing ground. I think it's interesting that Kelly's not on the trip. Nawrocki's injured, so he's not been taken on the trip. CCV and Johnson joined it a wee bit later, and hopefully we'll see them against Chelsea.
It's interesting to see that they've changed their tact on that, because Julian was injured, but they still took him to Dubai, didn't they?
Oh, JP. Oh, that's taking us back to deep, dark recesses. You're right. You're right.
Why did he go? Why did he go?
Well, I'm going to use the word jolly, right? Which I think annoyed the gaffer at the time when someone said it was a jolly. Well, it was a jolly. He's never going to play, was he? But the other one that interested me was Siegrist, because the writing was on the wall when you seen that Siegrist wasn't in that big team group outside the White House, right? And of course, he has left the building. He has joined Neil Lennon over in Romania. We wish him well. It didn't work out, and we move on from that as well. I'm keen to get some of your comments coming through. I want you to know, I want you to tell me, what did you make of Brendan Rodgers' comments? These are the two big discussion points for the last half hour. Brendan Rodgers' comments after the Man City game when questioned about recruitment. And also, we don't focus on anybody else except Celtic unless it affects Celtic. Does the happenings over at Ibrox affect the way that Celtic do their business this pre-season, and why? Right, that's the big question, because obviously it goes hand in hand with the recruitment, doesn't it? It shouldn't. I don't think it should affect the way that we do our business. Will it affect us, and why? Mark Riley, welcome to the show, Mark. Mark was showing me, JP, pictures of ... That could mean anything, right? Pictures of the day he was a mascot at Celtic back in the 1980s, right? Davy Hay was the manager at the time, and he was telling me that, you know, the whole process was like, you know, you got a letter for the club that he kept. He still got it, and it was all the details of the game. It was a midweek game, so school the next day. You turn up, Celtic give you the full kit that you keep. You go into the dressing room before the game, and he's seeing guys like Danny McGrain and Tommy Burns and all that. JP, what an experience for a young kid. But what he was also telling me is like, Mark's from Fife, Cowdenbeath, and from time to time, either at the school or soccer camps or clubs that he was at, Celtic players would go and visit them. And he's got these great pictures of the Celtic players in the full tracksuit, centenary tracksuit, visiting the school and all that kind of stuff, JP. Does that still happen? Are we still, you know, engaging with communities in that sense? Because I think if you're a wee Celtic fan at that point and that happens, it just adds another, it galvanizes you, you know, to meet your heroes and to meet Celtic players. I don't know if it still happens.
Well, Michael Taggart, who you've sort of met by being here, his son was asked to be a mascot, and I'm not sure what the how that came about. I need to ask him, but he got a letter, and it was basically, I don't know if they were aware that he was a season ticket holder or whatever, goes to all the games, but yeah, he was asked, and obviously Michael was as proud as I've ever seen him. Like, Celtic's in his blood, and then for his son to lead out the team was a huge deal for him. So I don't know. I don't know the methodology of how they go about it, but I mean, I'd like to think that there's still that connection, but you've seen it being diluted year after year with less players attending supporters functions and things like that. That's not quite as prevalent as it once was, although it does still happen. It's just not. It doesn't seem to be current players. It's more ex-players that kind of do those sort of things, which is obviously great still. But, you know, to get a current player along to a function now is not as easy or as straightforward as it once was. And I think Tommy Burns definitely had a massive part to play in that. He would insist that when he came to the Tommy Burns supper in Edinburgh, he would insist that a current player would come with him. Like, he brought Neil Lennon. In fact, he would have been there because Neil Lennon came as a bleach blonde haired youngster at the time, and there were others as well that came. Ulrich Larsson came along. I remember that. Perhaps not the most high profile of Celtic player, but it was still pretty cool to actually have a current player at your supporters function. You know,
Absolutely.
But, yeah,
I think that it's just that level of engagement. I know it's difficult, right? But whenever you're in the presence of anybody that played for the centenary team, they talk about the fact that Billy O'Neill actually had a folder, and every week players were expected to go to these functions, sometimes twice on the same night. And I remember a few months ago speaking to Peter Grant about it, and he said that on the day that, obviously under Davy Hay, on this occasion, the day that Celtic clinched the league title in 1986 at Love Street, him and Paul McGugan had to jump in a car and drive away up north. There was some function up north, and it was way up north. It was like a 3-hour drive. And they done the function and drove all the way back down. So it's not as if they could enjoy whatever the club had arranged up at Celtic Park for them to celebrate the league title when they had to go up to the CSC. And they didn't mind doing it. You know, it was expected of them, but they were happy to do it. And I think it's something that is definitely missed. It's much missed. And we were with Peter Grant yesterday for This Is Acsom. This is a Celtic State of Mind, of course, is the new Friday night show. This is episode 9. It's Peter Grant, and he was on tremendous form. There was one wee story he told about Paolo Di Canio that we probably can't put out there because he might get into trouble. And this is funny because Tosh McKinley told a couple of wee stories about Paolo Di Canio that we couldn't put in the final episode either, JP, because somebody might get into trouble. But these are the things that come out when people are on tour. This is the whole point of it. Peter told us a few stories when they were on tour and what happened on tour. Kenny, it does build the team bond, the camaraderie between the players. And then, I think that during that season, JP, and it's the same way any kind of team bonding, and you'll have done it in your workplace and all the rest of it. It's one of the things that if you build that bond in the pre-season, then it stays with you for the entirety of the campaign. And I think the American trip, famously, prior to the Lisbon season, is always looked back on as being so important in creating that bond and the part of the success that we went on to achieve 5 trophies the following season as well, JP. So if you're not on that trip, I don't think it bodes well for you for the future. Now, but I've actually... Sorry, on you.
In the same vein, though, like if we've got, say, 4 players like pending to come in, whether it's Bernardo, Ida, whoever else, like that trip is a crucial part of that bonding experience and of that time to develop relationships either on the training ground or off it. And that's the really frustrating thing from my point of view, is you're just like, how are these not happened? And I guess that's to be talked about, given what you said, Brendan Rodgers talking about afterwards, how he had a conversation with Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay about the state of play and where we want to sign and everything else. It's just, why is that not happened yet? But I know that there's time yet and everything else, but we're not far away from the start of the league season. And yeah, if everybody's fit, fairly comfortable. And I'm obviously pleased that Schmeichel and Sinisalo have got out there. I think having the number... Imagine if we hadn't signed Kasper Schmeichel until after the American trip. That would have been absolutely ridiculous, really, especially when he wasn't doing anything. So it's good that we managed to get him out there, even if he did miss the first part of it. But I know he had the Euros, obviously. I'm aware of that. But yeah, Schmeichel certainly looks like the right character, and obviously backing it up with a pretty decent performance against the machine that is Erling Haaland, who was denied, twice, I think. Those 2 really good saves. Yeah. And just his overall demeanour and everything else, I think, like the players that are there already, to lose Joe Hart was a massive loss. There's no question about it. You saw the way that he was loved and respected by the rest of the team and everything else, and certainly by the fans. So that was a massive hole that we had to fill there. And we spoke about it and said, look, that this is a huge signing that we have to make here. And I think credit to them for going out and getting a player. Yes, it's short term. Yes, it's people will point and say, where's our scouting? What is our scouting profiles if we're signing a 37-year-old keeper? But I think there's a difference between we could have signed a 37-year-old keeper that doesn't have the personality or profile of Kasper Schmeichel. But the fact is, we've signed him, and there's a lot more comes with him than just his surname. I think he seems like a really nice guy, and you almost can't put a price on that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could be best keeper ever, but you could be... I was going to use a swear word there, but I'll refrain. You could be a insert expletive, but he definitely doesn't seem that way. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, just before we move on to the 2 big discussion points before we finish Thursday's bulletin, which are, of course, comments made by Brendan Rodgers after the game in relation to recruitment, and then what we do as a football club should not really be based on what happens on the other side of the city. But what's your thoughts? Is that the case? Before I do that, I'm going to share some pictures of you. This is Celtic players, current Celtic players, visiting Denny CSC. Neely Mawkins' late wife is in that picture as well. There you go. There's wee Joe. And we've also got, there's Neely on the left-hand side. Look at him. Brilliant. That's a great picture. Do you know any of the others in this? Let us know in the comments field. You might even be tuning in. And there he is. There's the man, George Cadetti. And now look at that shirt, that green shirt on the right-hand side there. Absolutely quality. Brilliant. And that is Mrs. Mockin as well. So, yeah, these are the kind of things that Celtic did every week, you know, at CSCs all around the country. And
I had a green Armani shirt very similar to that back in the kind of late 90s.
Was it a top 10 number? Look at that.
He's
like something for the Sopranos, that guy.
An extravagant purchase that wasn't worn that many times, to be honest. I kind of got it and then...
JP, like, I want to see it hanging up on that coat hanger next week.
No, it's long gone. It's long gone. I don't know. It perished at some point in the last couple of decades, but yeah.
Here we go. A few comments and we'll get stuck into the big talking points. Gary Doonan, great to see you. Man City right back has full England cap. I'll tell you what, made a Torum, a new one. And midfield players Phillips and McAtee were Premier League players last season also. Yeah, that's the thing. We can play it down and say it was a weekend squad. Some real quality in that Manchester City team. Dermot O'Connor, watching from an airport lounge in Zurich after my overnight flight from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Great to be listening in again. It's great. Thanks, Dermot. That's amazing.
Zurich Airport is the most expensive airport I've ever been in my life. Like,
is it?
Yeah. Me and Michael flew back and we went via Zurich, and I think both of our appetites returned, unfortunately for us, at that exact moment. So I think we were probably hungover, and then we started to be hungry at Zurich Airport. Big mistake. It's so expensive.
You had to trade that green Armani shirt just for lunch, didn't you?
I mean, the equivalent of that, how much that cost, was probably what we spent on like a burger, chips, and a beer or something. That was absolutely eye-watering. But I guess they get paid more there. But yeah, I'm sure Dermot will. Well, I don't know what he does, but I mean, I'm sure he'll be overspending currently if he's in an airport lounge in Zurich.
Yeah, from Zurich to Guruk, this is Acsom, and Celtic fans will be found wherever you are. Corn, Celt, arm matching shelving units and Acsom bylaw now. We're in the same room, didn't you know? We're sitting side by side, staring into a screen in the same direction. We could well be, you would never know. Fascinating facts. Here we go. Too soon to start the 10 in a row song again?
Definitely too soon.
Nah. I'm not wearing the merch quite yet, that's for sure. Boy 67 CFC, my favourite double act. Hail, lads. Oh, thanks very much. And it looks as though you're wearing a bit of double denim there. Here you go. Just to bring it all the way back down to the board. Kevin Graham, and I don't think he's in the country either. He's on foreign soil. Pre-season means nothing. We have moved forward. We have moved forward from last season. We haven't moved forward from last season yet. And that should be the focus. Chances are we won't sack the board. Right. This leads us into the discussion point in and around the comments made by Brendan Rodgers. We know that he can be cutting with his words, JP. I go back to his first tenure with the infamous Terminado, right? Interview. And we were all, if we didn't know already, we were all getting a bit concerned about the future of Brendan Rodgers at the club. He's not really been doing that so much since he came back, but there has been occasions where he has used that platform to let the players know, and on this occasion to let the board know, I think, that he's not happy. Am I reading too much into it? Is he basically saying, look, guys, I've given you a list of the players I want, and the players I want out the building, go and do it? Was that the message to Michael and Chris when he was getting interviewed after the game?
I think it was more to placate the supporters, because you'll be well aware that we're basically the support right now collectively is the John Travolta gif, you know, where he's just kind of, from Pulp Fiction, where he's kind of like sort of standing going, like, what's happening here?
Where is it? What's happening?
Yeah. Where's this? Where's the expenditure? I've said before, I don't want us to go out and just fling money at ridiculous projects, or not projects, but ridiculous signings, or be absolutely done by clubs because they know we've got money to spend or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that, but it gets to the point where you're like, how are we not strengthening to the level that we would expect a club of Celtic to do, and with the money we've got, and everyone's just going to. I really hope that all the people like Kev, who's saying sack the board, I hope they're all kind of silenced by the end of this transfer window, where we have actually recruited in positions that we know we need to recruit in, because right now, as things stand, I'm pretty disappointed as a Celtic season ticket holder. If you were to grill me on what my actual thoughts are, I'm disappointed that we haven't spent money, and it's not because I want shiny new toys. It's because there's been glaring sort of places in the team that need to be addressed for more than a season, and we've made a mess of it so many times in certain positions that you just want us to get it right in as many positions as we can. And there's still this spectre of losing Matt O'Reilly hanging over us, where it's 1 minute it's Southampton putting in a low ball bid, then Atalanta coming back with a second bid. Obviously, he'll be on many other clubs' radar. So we know that is a realistic possibility. And for some reason, it just went into my head a few days ago. I was like, surely we're not waiting to spend money when we sell Matt O'Reilly. Like that, why on earth would that money be any different to the money or more important than the money that we already have in the bank to spend? Like, surely it's not a case of like, oh, well, if we sell Matt O'Reilly, we make a 24 million profit in Matt O'Reilly, then that's when we go out and buy Adam Ida for 6 million or Bernardo for 4 and all the rest of it. Like, is that like people always talk about the domino waiting to fall and everything else, but surely we determine what dominoes fall for our playing squad, and it's not a case of like, oh well, if Matt O'Reilly goes, then we go out and sign X, Y, and Z. So I really hope that's not the case. You just want to see progression, and we're not going to progress in the Champions League with this current squad. I just don't think that's the case. I mean, I don't think that's been disrespectful to the squad. I would love to think that would be the case, but I just don't think it is. And I think that we've got an opportunity now in a window where the summer window's allegedly the easier window to sign players. We've got cash. It's an attractive prospect. Here's guaranteed Champions League football. You're not going to get that at this club, and this club. Yes, you're playing in Scotland. Yes, there's the downside to that. I mean, I was talking to. I met a bunch of Cercle Bruges fans last night who are over for the friendly against Kilmarnock. Okay. I was speaking to one of them, really, really nice wee guy, and I was telling him, he was asking about the pitch and everything. I was like, it's not great. You're not going to see classy football played tomorrow night, put it that way, on that pitch. And I was like, I don't have high hopes for Rugby Park as like a fantastic amphitheatre of football, but I was like, I respect to you, man. I was like, I don't know, there's not many times in my life that I've travelled for a pre-season friendly to go and watch Celtic away, in another country. I mean, I've done it a few times, did it a lot when I was younger, but mostly it was English ones. But I mean, he's travelled over for a pre-season friendly against Kilmarnock, and I thought that fair play to you. But yeah, I know that the Scottish League's not that attractive, but we've got so much in our favour to sell as a football club. I don't think we should have any trouble signing players. We've proved it in the past with the likes of Carter Vickers and prizing him away from the Premier League. Jota coming away from Portugal. There's so many examples you can point to. So.
We can lure talent. I mean, I've heard people always going back to the Scottish football thing. And by the way, I know as do you, the failings of the game in Scotland, right? But you can definitely lure people in with the Celtic thing, because it is a club, like Kasper Schmeichel said, that people want to go and taste success. It's at various different stages of their career, not just when they're coming to kind of wind down. but also the platform. So you look at the Jota situation, obviously his destination wasn't ideal for him, but it's happened with various players, you know, who have made their way down to the Premiership, etc. There's a whole list of them. And then there's the Champions League. So I think there's three big selling points, three massive selling points. You've got the platform where you can go into a bigger and richer league. You've got the fact that it's Celtic and everything that comes with that. And you've also got, what was it? Brendan Rodgers called it the Celtic experience, right? And then you've got the Champions League. So
trademark that.
Yeah, I know, the Celtic experience. But for me, I'm looking at the situation where we are right now, and I only talk about other teams when they're affecting Celtic. There is a situation in Scottish football right now that can affect every other club in the Football League, as it did back in 2012. And that is the fact that you've got a club who are deemed to be one of the big two, right? No matter what happens, they're always going to be lumped in as the big two. And they're homeless at the moment, right? They don't have a stadium to play in. They have done a deal that nobody knows the details of with the powers that be, so that the games are played at Hampden Park. Now, this is the point I was making yesterday, JP, right? When Celtic played at Hampden, everybody knew what we were getting charged. Everybody knew the intricate details of that deal. And later on, we found out, and this is the one thing I always go back to, Fergus McCann called the SFA mean-spirited due to some of the conditions of the contract. And one of which was that there would be no flying, and this is a verbatim quote, of a foreign flag at Hampden, which prevented Celtic from flying the Irish tricolour. So when you look at the stringent contract and all the different issues that brought to Celtic when we planned a move to Hampden, it wasn't like an emergency move, it was a planned move to Hampden. We knew the work was going to happen at Celtic Park. And on this occasion, everything's been cloak and dagger, and it's all very secret, and it's smoke and mirrors, right? And they're getting preferential treatment again. No one will convince me otherwise, right? But the bottom line is they're going to be hemorrhaging money while they're playing at Hampden. They are going to be hemorrhaging money, losing money hand over fist. There's a flash sale at the moment on it at Ibrox. Todd Cantwell, like him, loathe him, ignore him. The reason that comment was made last night is because they need a transfer fee for him, and they see him as an asset that they can sell. Regardless of what's happened in the past, they're trying to sell everything they possibly can because they're in dire straits. And we're in a situation now where I don't even have the time, JP, as I've told you before, to watch other Celtic podcasts, never mind Rangers podcasts. But if you've got social media right now, you can't avoid some of the clips that are popping up, right? And you can see the clips coming up. And they are in dire straits, the fans. They're really panicking. They're talking about not even coming second next season, right? If that is the case, if you're a club in Scotland, you should be looking at that as an opportunity, right? So if you take Celtic and Rangers out of the equation at the moment, who are the next four biggest clubs? And I don't mean the four clubs that came third, fourth, fifth, and sixth last season. Who do you think are the? Because I think Hibs and Hearts, Aberdeen, and believe it or not, Dundee United, I think they're the four biggest clubs behind Celtic and Rangers. I don't know if you look at turnover or season ticket sales or average attendances. They're the four clubs I've always regarded as being the biggest four. One of them needs to step up. Now, you look at Hibs, they're a basket case of a football club. 10 managers in 10 years. They're getting beat off of Celtic Hearts. They're rotten, right? Massive potential.
I met Michael Brennan on Saturday in Kirkcaldy, weirdly, just randomly, and he'd just been at the game. He was trying to play it down by the fact that they were still top and they were going to go through in the whatever it is, the League Cup league. But I mean, I was like, you just got beat off Celtic Hearts. He said the ground's got like shipping containers all around it. Like they've developed it to an extent, but yeah, I mean that's not great, is it?
They're shambles. They're shambles, right? And the huge potential, capital club, all this kind of stuff. Aberdeen, a one-team city, all that kind of stuff. Total underachievers. Dundee United just got promoted back into the top league. Complete underachievers. Aberdeen and Dundee United will never have another Fergie or Jim McLean moment, right? That was an anomaly, and they should be much stronger than they are. So it leaves us with Hearts. What are they going to see this as an opportunity to push on? Because you imagine for a moment, JP, right? They look at that scenario and they go, wait a minute. Rangers are a shambles. Celtic are going to obviously go full throttle, hopefully, right? And win the league at a canter if we buy properly and we approach it right. We should. Hearts should be looking at the situation and saying, how much of an investment will it take for us to come second? Because what then happens is you qualify for the Champions League qualifiers. Within 2 years, you could be pushing for a Champions League place. And that completely changes the landscape of Scottish football.
Well, it's
Are
not
are they ambitious enough to do it?
Well, they obviously need to start by not selling their captain I mean, there's generally like 1.5 million, 2 million for it. I mean, surely, I mean that doesn't really stack up in terms of the way that the transfer market is nowadays. I mean, you're not a 31 an international striker who scored 31 goals. By the way, I was just going to say there's not been any signings this week, and then bang, I was in my head about 10 seconds ago to say.
Always in the last 15 minutes, JP. I honestly think somebody, right, who's at your local station is a Rangers fan. That's how I do it.
But the Shankland valuation, I definitely would be looking for about double that if I was Hearts. In today's transfer market, I mean, he's not 33, 34. He's close to 30, fair enough. But like I don't think he's an amazing player, but I'd certainly think that 1.5 million to 2 million, if I was Hearts, I'd be like, absolutely no way. When you see the prices that are going around of players, I'd be looking for a lot more than that. And I know player power is a thing and everything else. And if he does want to go there, I would question his. Maybe not his sanity, but like he's certainly question.
What's that going to do for your career at this moment? You know,
I mean, they're not really an attractive prospect at this moment, and I think even their most hardcore of supporters would say they're not really an attractive prospect at this moment because they're at 6s and 7s, and by the sounds of things, at halftime last night there was some angry bears in the
bears.
But I don't know. It is interesting to see that they could look at that as an opportunity to try and split Celtic and Rangers again. They did it before. It was a long time ago. How long ago was that? They did split. Hearts split Celtic and Rangers. Was it the George Burley season?
Well, the George Burley season, I think, was another opportunity. By the end of the campaign, I'm pretty sure Rangers actually came second, JP, but for a long spell, Hearts were in the hunt. Hearts were in the hunt. You're talking there about their kind of star man just now, their talisman, the captain, international player. I mentioned yesterday, first player to score 30 goals for Hearts since 1988. It doesn't happen very often, and you're talking about 1.5 to 2 million. Show some ambition. Keep the player. Strengthen your squad. Right, and don't be daft about it. Just like strengthen that squad and go for second position, get into the Champions League qualifiers, and then push on again, JP, for a second round, and then push on into the Champions League. And as I say, that changes everything. That changes everything for a club like Hearts. That changes everything in Scottish football. Do they have the vision? Do they have the ambition? Are they just comfortable to be that third club and get a couple of results here and then maybe win a Scottish Cup now and again? Seriously, you shouldn't be comfortable doing that.
Well, the level of their ambition will, or the level of their first team playing squad, whatever you want to call it, will be shown a week on Saturday when we see what they are like. I mean, they've been notoriously bad against Rangers, Hearts. There'll be times in the past where you're like, surely. I mean, that Scottish Cup semi-final, they might as well just put the white flag up from the first whistle. It was pathetic. So against a not very good Rangers side, but they seem to have quite a weak mentality when it comes to facing them. But see, in regards to your point about whether or not what happens at Ibrox or wherever that affects our thinking, it shouldn't at all, because the amount of times that we have said when Brendan Rodgers or whatever manager, Ange Postecoglou, whoever has been asked about anything to do with Rangers, or we focus on ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't be a case of, oh, well, they've only done this or they're in this nick. We should just be happy with our lot or anything like that. Absolutely no way. We we've not won a knockout tie in Europe for 20 years. Like, that's a horrible, horrible thing to have hanging over us. And as someone who was lucky enough to be at a European final in 2003, that's a long, long time ago. And I, to be honest, it's actually wild when you think about it. We go from like 1995 versus Airdrie in the Scottish Cup final. 8 years later, we are playing in a European final from that, and that was like celebrated as if, you know, first trophy in 6 years, all the rest of it. So you look at that progression. But then since then, yes, we've had a few last 16s. Yes, we obviously beat Barcelona famously. However, I would love to make more of a mark in Europe. And really, you know, put a performance in. I know it was a pre-season friendly, but put a performance in like we did against Man City in the first half against a decent side where we express ourselves, and it doesn't really matter what that team does because we've brought our game to the table, and that's what so many folk my age, younger, older, everybody wants that because that's the true testing ground, and we have been spoiled with success at home and would never take it for granted. Celebrated those victories last season like they were because we'd been run so close. Celebrated them as passionately as I have any others, potentially more in fact, because we were being told that the league was done in February and all the rest of it, and we're winning this, quote unquote, from an unnamed source. But I think I know it's difficult. I know that the level of spending that we go up against in Europe is a huge chasm. But if we're clever about it, we could build a good team that could do something. That I'm not saying we're going to get to the final, but just to like let us dream a bit again. You know, that's what everybody wants to do.
Totally. Well, I'm going to go back to the nuts and bolts. There's been 23 teams. Only 23 teams won the European Cup or Champions League. Celtic are one of them, right? So in terms of the heritage of that tournament, Celtic should always have aspirations to compete at the top level in European football. When you go back to that run from 64 to 76, and in that spell of a dozen years, you know, getting to at least the quarter-final European tournaments on 9 occasions. Unbelievable, right? So it wasn't a flash in the pan. Lisbon wasn't a flash in the pan, but we've not been putting it out enough for me. The ambition, the vision. So when I say that Schmeichel, Carter-Vickers, O'Reilly, Hatate, McGregor, and Kyogo are good enough for Celtic in the Champions League, then there's an argument for Johnston to be in there. I don't know what you think. The 7 guys I've just mentioned, are they all? And I'm talking good enough to play for Celtic in the Champions League, not good enough to play for Real Madrid in the Champions League. There's 7 players. So then you're saying, well, at least fill the starting 11 with 11 players of that calibre, of that ilk.
Yeah.
And then we'll see where we are. And you might not have the squad depth to progress to the latter stages, but at least you're giving yourself a chance, JP. You're going into games every time thinking, right, we've got our stand men, but then you're playing him at left back, or you're playing him at right back, or him at centre half, who's certainly not good enough for this level. And it's been like that probably for the entirety of my Celtic supporting life, maybe other than Seville, but then people have a dig at Rab Douglas when it comes to Seville. You look at the games that we won, you know, the great runs that we had under Gordon Strachan, and people point out some of the guys that we were actually playing in these teams. You look at the Barcelona game you mentioned, who was playing centre half? Kelvin Wilson and Effie Ambrose. We had Miku up front. So if you have 11 players of the ilk of the 7 I've just mentioned there's a starting point. I've never gone into a campaign thinking every player on that pitch is of that level and of that standard that we can really have a go at this. There's always that element of regret, you know, if we had 3 or 4 extra bodies in of that ilk, we could do so much better.
And you also want to have progression, because we have made a progression from Ange's last season into Brendan Rodgers' this season. We won a Champions League game. I know it was a dead rubber, but we won a Champions League game, which was a huge, huge thing that we hadn't done for a long, long time. 10 years or something like that, I think it'd been since we won one. At home, because we obviously beat Anderlecht away. I was talking to that Bruges fan about that last night. happy about that. But also it keeps Brendan Rodgers stimulated as well. We don't want to lose a manager of this calibre, and you want him to be for his own ego as well. He wants to progress in Europe. He mentioned it when he came back, and he mentioned that was the that was one of the things pinned on the board that we wanted to do. I don't mean the actual board. I mean a physical board.
A notice board.
Yeah. But that was one of the things that was on his agenda, was that he wanted to push the club forward in Europe, and in order to do that, you have to spend money from time to time, and that's just something, and spend it well as opposed to badly, which is what we did last summer.
No, you're right. By the way, that's only my opinion, and people might disagree with the 7 guys I've mentioned, right? But Bud Roaster, interesting name. Did you mention Maeda in that 11? I didn't. Is he in it? What do you think? Let us know in the comments section. I didn't mention
There was
Maeda.
a point in that game against Man City where a ball was played. I think it was Matt O'Reilly, maybe, but he knew that Maeda would make it, and he just smacked it into the. Do you remember
I know the ball? Oh, what? By the way, no one else is catching that ball. By the way, but as you say, O'Reilly knew he could put a wee bit more on it.
And he got to it.
Yeah,
like wow. I mean that was really impressive. And then for neutrals watching that game, as I'm sure there were many, people were probably like, who's this guy? Well, they were all raving about Kuhn, weren't they? There were people, Man City fans in the comments. I mean, Man City fans. I don't know how well you can class them as fans, but they're saying, "Oh, who's this guy? He's playing like prime Messi," and you're like, I don't know about that, but
I was actually thinking more Paddy Roberts. I think there's a style about him that reminds me a bit like Paddy Roberts, where he jinks inside and
another ex-Man City player.
Yeah. Listen, let's say Maeda's in that group of players, right? That collective. That takes us to 8, which means you bring in another 3. The other point I would make, those 8 players haven't cost us 10 million quid each. Add it up. Add up what those 8 players cost us, and it's nowhere near what the top clubs in the Champions League are spending. But imagine having 11 of that standard. At least then, JP, you're thinking, right, I know the constraints of Scottish football and what we can and can't spend, but I'm confident going into a game that we've got the best we can have. And I've not had that confidence for a long time going into European games. So that's what I am.
I agree. But I mean, it's as ever, it's over to them to shut us up and be able to say, "Ha, told you so." We had all this up our sleeve, and Alakazam, here it is, and you've got X, Y, and Z player in the positions that you were hoping for. Because every summer it feels like kind of Christmas Eve, and then at the end of the transfer window, you've opened a Paul Daniels Magic set that's about 20 years out of date. You're just, is this it?
I know, you're right. You're absolutely right. Listen, it's been tremendous as always, JP. You've soldiered on today, having not been.
Apologies for my
well done.
baritone or whatever you want to call it, but I'm kind of suffering a bit at the moment. So
no, we do appreciate it, JP. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you're kicking around Glasgow tomorrow night or Grangemouth on Saturday night and you want to come for a wee bit of Celtic action, we've got Joe Ledley tomorrow night. There are, I think, 8 tickets available for that one, so you can click on the link. And then at Grangemouth, few tickets available for the Grangemouth one. Joe will be joined by Charlie Mulgrew, who's brilliant on the stage, absolutely tremendous. A couple of boys who played in that Barcelona game. We'll talk about that and more. All the ticket links are underneath the video. Thanks again for getting involved. The Acsom community continues to grow. And once again, thank you to John Paul Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.